Hello everyone and welcome to another Kerbal Space Program video, a mission of epic proportions. I'm really proud of how this video came out, so I do hope you enjoy the next, oh gosh, it's a long one, isn't it? 40 or so minutes, but I can assure you I've not tried to drag this video out or anything like that. A lot of things happen, so I'm now going to use this intro time to talk about what this video is going to be. In case it wasn't obvious from the title or thumbnail, I haven't put a title and thumbnail. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. It's going to be a recreation of the NASA Mars 2020 mission and the planned recovery mission by the ESA. So for those that don't know, last week NASA launched the Perseverance rover to Mars. It's epic. It's very similar to Curiosity in terms of its size, but its main objective is to look for life on the red planet, and then a subsequent mission coordinated by the ESA, European Space Agency, will take place in which another rover launches to Mars, lands near the Perseverance rover. It collects a little surface sample that was collected by the Perseverance rover. This second rover then takes that sample to a little, a rocket, which then launches it back to Earth. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be, first of all, sending the Perseverance rover to Juno, which is, of course, the Martian analog of Kerbal Space Program. We're going to do some sort of tinkering around on the Martian surface, kind of do some science, that sort of thing. And then we're going to send a second rocket in an Ariane 5. I know it probably won't be an Ariane 5 when the mission happens, but we've got Ariane 5 parts now, so gosh darn it, I'm going to make use of them. And this second mission will transfer all of the science from the Perseverance rover and then launch it back to Kerbin, where our Kerbal scientists can thoroughly analyze the findings. Now, some of you may be getting worried at this point because I have omitted one very cool part of the Perseverance mission, and that is, of course, the little Ingenuity helicopter, which will be the first powered flight on a celestial body that isn't Earth. In the real world I'm talking about now. The qualifier powered flight is important because, of course, flight has occurred on other planets before when Russia sent their balloon aerobots to Venus. They floated in the Venusian clouds, but those weren't powered flights. The Ingenuity helicopter is going to be a real step forward in establishing whether or not powered flight will be possible on Mars, and that is going to be featured in this video here. I just forgot to add it when I was building it, and I'm not even trying to make a joke here. When I built the rocket, I built it, and I sat back and I'm like, yes, it's ready to be launched. And then I launched it and I was like, hang on, Matthew. I feel like I've forgotten something here. And it turned out I was like, oh yes, I forgot about the helicopter, which is actually, ironically, one of the things I'm most looking forward to about the Mars 2020 mission is the little helicopter that Perseverance will deploy. So NASA's plan will be that the Perseverance rover lands on Mars, and then a little helicopter drops out from underneath its belly, and that does a few little flights, mainly to take photos and stuff. It's not going to do anything substantial, because it's more a proof of concept sort of thing, and also Mars's atmosphere is so thin that helicopters are very, very difficult to make. It has to be exceptionally light, so it can't really carry any significant hardware, at least in terms of mass. So that will be added to this rocket. I deliberate on how to do this, though, because I'm building this rocket at, in air quotes, Kerbal scale, and then I'm using the parts of KSP, how they were intended, and kind of how a Kerbal mission like this would be designed if it weren't meant to be designed as a recreation of the NASA mission. How would you just do a rover mission in Kerbal Space Program that comes with a little helicopter? And I couldn't find an elegant way to stuff the little helicopter underneath the rover, so it's going to be a slight variation, a slight alternate history, or alternate future, I suppose, unless this video has stood the test of time and you're watching this after the Perseverance has hopefully made a successful touchdown on Mars. I'm getting away from the point, though. This thing is, the long and short, going to be on top of the Perseverance rover rather than on the bottom of it, just because that was the only real way I could figure out how to get this thing to work. So it's a slight deviation from the NASA mission, but I think it's an acceptable compromise. The other thing I could have done, which is what ShadowZone did, he wanted to make a much more faithful recreation of the Perseverance rover. And you can't do that at Kerbal scales. His rover was biblically massive. He built it out of gigantic pieces, and it looked the bee's knees, I'll tell you. It looked exactly like the Perseverance rover, and it had the helicopter all stowed away correctly, but it's not what I was going for in this video. What I was going for was, how would we do this mission in Kerbal scale? Now you can see me in the tracking station making sure I am at a good transfer window for Juno, which if you don't know, and everyone's gonna say I say this all the time, but I'm gonna say it again, darn it. If you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Juno, the angle that line forms at the sun should be about 45 degrees. If you want to do it correctly, then you could use something like transfer window planner or Kerbal alarm clock to get you on a really good transfer window. I tend to just eyeball it, to be honest, which is why my transfer windows are usually not very optimal. Now I say it out loud, but regardless, it's fine. We've got enough delta V. Here you can see me launching this payload on a very janky looking Atlas rocket. I couldn't really make a very good recreation of the Atlas that carried the Perseverance into orbit, so this was kind of the best. I mean, I feel like the focus of this mission is meant to be the rover and the helicopter. It's fine. The rover and helicopter setup isn't exactly accurate to what NASA did, nor was the payload underneath it, which we'll get to talking about when we get there. But I thought, we'll just go for a general shape. So we've got the SRBs around a single stack with 2 engines. That's what I'm launching on there. I was about to talk about what's underneath the rover, like also inside that fairing, but I thought I might as well just wait until, we've exited the atmosphere and we can deploy the upper fairing, and then I can actually talk about it whilst it's on screen, so you have some sort of visual reference whilst I'm rambling. So we'll just sit back. We'll just sit back at our seats, and we've got flame out. We are still got a few. The fairing edge is still glowing a little bit red, so we should probably coast forward a little bit using physical time warp just to get ourselves a little bit higher out of the atmosphere entirely, and then we should be safe to deploy that payload fairing. So you can see this rocket setup here. Very small, because obviously we don't need to return from Juno, so it didn't need a particularly high amount of delta V compared to an anticipated return mission from Juno. What we've got the upper part, which is of course the Perseverance and Ingenuity helicopter landing segment. We've also got this thing behind it, and that's basically going to be the craft that allows us to communicate with the rover and control it. I'm actually doing this mission in a blank science save, so I sort of cheated myself to get the whole tech tree unlocked so I could do this mission, but I'm not doing this in my normal Lowne Aerospace save, just for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I've already done science from Juno in Lowne Aerospace, and I kind of wanted to do this fresh so we could see how much science we could get from doing this mission if we did it in a fresh save. And also, I don't know, Lowne Aerospace is starting to get a little bit cluttered. Like, navigating the file system when you're trying to load ships in the spaceplane hangar and vehicle assembly building, it's becoming a bit of a pain. Basically, it's just it takes ages to find it. And with this particular mission, there were so many different craft. Whilst I was building it, admittedly, in this video there are only 2 rockets that actually fly, but those rockets were made of lots of different craft. I had to keep chopping and changing between editors to make them all work, and I feel like I just didn't have the energy to keep on scrolling through the vast number of crafts in my Lowne Aerospace save file. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that save file. I'm not going to abandon it, obviously, because Life on Lathe and Destination Juno are within that save file. But I don't know, maybe for kind of other missions outside of those 2 series, the Series, maybe I should do another save file for them. So then it comes to what kind of save file should I use? Should I do another science mode playthrough but add some other sort of caveat to keep things fresh? Or do we do a career mode playthrough? I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still umming and ahhing and thinking things through, so I'll make that decision as and when I need to. I mean, I was thinking I've always rebooted Lowne Aerospace whenever a DLC has come out, so Making History and Breaking Ground, because those DLC packs generally necessitated a reset of your game in order to have them function correctly. But I don't know if any more DLC is going to come out, guys. I know Squad are still updating Kerbal Space Program and are doing great things with the texture revamps. I personally cannot wait for Tylo and Val to get a nice little texture update, but I don't think they're going to be doing anything too ambitious because it's going to steal the thunder away from Kerbal Space Program 2. Although, now that's been pushed back, who knows, maybe Kerbal 1 will get some more DLC, but then I don't know what the office situation is like at the Kerbal Space Program development team. So I don't know, but I would probably not, if I were a betting person, I would probably wager that there probably isn't going to be another DLC for Kerbal Space Program 1. So I'm going to have to come up with some other reason to reset my save file, and it's looking increasingly like it's just because everything's getting too cluttered for me to continue with videos. Now, as you can see, we have entered Duna's sphere of influence, so I should probably talk about what I'm doing. I have separated the two craft here because the paths must now diverge. Our upper stage, well, what was the upper stage, it is now just a separate vessel, is going to enter Duna's atmosphere and just aero capture. The other stage is the Poodle engine stage. We don't want that entering the atmosphere. We want to keep that in Juno orbit because, as I mentioned, and then I went on a massive tangent now I think about it out loud, the plan was to have that other vessel here because it's got a relay on it. The actual antenna on the rover is not powerful enough to get back to the tracking station on Kerbin, so we can't control the rover. So we needed that big relay to sit in orbit around Juno just to allow us to, effectively control the rover and indeed the little helicopter. Now we can begin the landing sequence. The first thing we're doing is deploying that upper parachute. We didn't really need it. I only added the parachute to ensure that our fairing piece will detach safely because unlike the actual Perseverance rover, which will just fall away from its fairing housing, it doesn't work in Kerbal Space Program, so we had to just have the whole fairing just obliterate itself like that. And then we're going to land it using the little sky crane piece that you saw me build. And then as we touch down, we can quickly throttle up those engines and allow it to fly away. It was attached rather cheekily using that docking port on the rover. So I just staged it and it flew away safe and clear from the rover. Now, I didn't plan this bit very well because I set up a maneuver node to capture, well, for this thing to capture around Juno, and it took me so long to get the Perseverance rover to land on the surface of the planet that by the time I was able to switch back to this one, it was way past periapsis. Luckily, it had enough delta V to circularize in spite of this little mishap, so it was all fine in the end. Now, I went for a kind of moderately high altitude. Like, we can't get too high because obviously then the rover won't even be able to reach this relay, but I didn't want it too low because I wanted to get as much coverage of Juno's surface as possible. So I felt like I think it was a 200 kilometer orbital height. I felt that was a good compromise for our mission. And there we have it there. In case anyone skipped the build and doesn't know what's in that little cargo piece, as in the service bay, that's the name of the part. There's nothing special in there, really. It's just some fuel tanks and probe cores, that sort of thing. So it's not meant to be opened. Now we can time warp around to when the probe is in view of the rover so that it can communicate with the Kerbal Space Center, and then we can begin our surface antics on Juno. So the first thing we're going to do is throttle up the little rotor on that helicopter, and we can take it for a little spin. Pun intended, possibly there. Thank you, by the way, for all the people who commented with regard to my queries during my Dragonfly mission to Lathe video. I said, is there any way of having like the throttle of in Kerbal Space Program, shift and control, Z and X, that sort of thing. Is there any way for that to directly influence the speed of rotors in Kerbal Space Program? And lots of people replied, told me how to do it, so thank you very much. You do it as an action group. I probably should have figured that out on my own. Not sure why you guys might have seen the little boob I just made. This thing crashed, but I guess rotor pieces must have really high impact tolerance because it just sort of bounced off the surface and didn't break, so that was lucky. Almost ended in disaster for our little Ingenuity helicopter there, but it was all fine in the end. It started this little flight. We've taken some aerial shots of the rover on the surface. Now it's time to land this thing. Any minute now, in just a second. There we go. Oh, little bounce. I'm not the best pilot of helicopters, as that may have been evidenced just then. But, fun little flight nonetheless. I would like to do more with the helicopter pieces, actually, in Kerbal Space Program. I haven't really made that many craft that utilize the rotor pieces, as in, like, for helicopters and propellers, I suppose. Like, I have used the rotors for rotating gravity rings and that sort of thing, but I haven't made any sort of propeller-powered aircraft. I've made the Eve plane, I made the little quadcopter to Lathe, and I made this. Doesn't really count because it's all this is just sort of an extra to the Perseverance rover. And I would like to do more with it. Now I've obviously got a series ongoing where I go to Lathe and go to Juno, and maybe I should try and implement more rotor use. Now that we have used our Ingenuity helicopter to establish that, yes, powered flight on Juno is possible. Now it's time to do the actual primary part of this mission, which is, of course, doing some general surveying of the surface of Mars. I know this thing doesn't look particularly similar to the Perseverance rover, but I wanted it to have function over form. Like I said, this isn't meant to be a one-for-one replica of the Perseverance rover, as is clearly evident, hopefully. But it's meant to be how you would do a similar mission in Kerbal Space Program. If you were inspired by NASA's launch and you wanted to do a similar sort of thing in Kerbal Space Program, this is how I would go about doing that. I mean, this is a very inefficient way of doing the mission. It would have been more efficient to bring a return craft with me on this flight, because rockets are not bound by the same laws of physics that NASA rockets are. I mean, Kerbal Space Program solar system is so much easier to fly around because it's so much smaller than the human solar system. Like, for scale, I think Kerbin, I think Earth. You can tell I played too much Kerbal Space Program when I call Earth Kerbin, right? But no, I think Earth is like the same size, if not slightly bigger, than Joule, which is obviously the biggest planet in Kerbal Space Program. I think Kerbal Space Program scale is 1/8 the size of real life, which is huge when it comes to, the difficulty of doing missions. But speaking of missions, of course, is the plural for mission, and we have just finished this mission. Now we need to get on to the second mission, making this video mission. I don't know what I was trying to do with that segue, but here we are, back in the not the vehicle assembly building, the space plane hangar, as we construct the second phase of this mission. If you'd like to just skip to around the 20-minute mark if you want to just get to the next flight. But I know that a lot of people appreciate seeing how I build stuff in Kerbal Space Program, so I left the time lapse in anyway. It's a fairly simple rig just here. We're going to have a little rocket that will carry a sample back into orbit, where it will rendezvous with another rocket that will then carry that sample back to Kerbin. So we kind of need 3 segments. So you've got those big, clunky, white boxes just there that contain scientific samples in Kerbal Space Program. So the first step is to obviously have all this land. And we've got this little rover that I'm constructing here. It's not a very good rover at the moment because it's got no wheels, but that will be fixed soon, I do promise. So that little rover will go and dock with the Perseverance rover on Mars. It'll then transfer all the science that rover collected into its science sample containment unit. It'll then drive back to the little rocket just here, transfer the science from its container to the rocket's container. The rocket will then launch and then dock with the orbiting station and then transfer the data all over again, and then that final vessel will fly back to Kerbin. So fairly complicated mission, fairly fun challenge to do, actually. I do want to mention something right here, actually. You can see how I've attached these two things with that strut piece. Do not do that, ladies and gentlemen. You can see I put the strut connector on the docking port of the little rover. And to my despair, when I, separated the vessels out upon Juno touchdown, that little strut connector stayed attached, and I couldn't decouple it using the docking piece, which meant I had to do the entire mission again. I had to revert to the flight and edit it to get rid of that strut, and then I had to launch the whole thing again. It was very painful. It added like an hour and a half to my evening, where I was like, I could have my dinner in a second. I've nearly finished the mission, and then that time, and I was like, okay. Where's the whiskey? You know what I mean? It was frustrating, but gosh darn it, if I'm not going to do things properly, then what am I even doing here? So, we have constructed that upper stage there. Now we can construct the lower stage, which, as I said, was going to be another little rocket that'll carry the payload back to Kerbin. Bit restricted this time because I wanted it to fit inside this service bay here, so we could only use the one little fuel tank, so I had to use a very small, low TWR engine to make up for that compromise. It's not a very powerful engine, but it's very efficient. And you can see I've got a little junior-sized docking port on the edge of that service bay. That's what the Juno surface to Juno orbit rocket will dock to. Added that little fuel line there just for aesthetics to make it more believable that the science can transfer, because presumably we're taking in surface samples, so we need some sort of pipe to transfer the surface sample into the return rocket, so that's why that fuel line is there. Completely unnecessary, but it just adds to the realism of this mission. So as you can see, I'm just putting in the finishing touches to our payload, and then we can get on to constructing the rest of the rocket, which, as I said earlier, is going to be an analog of the Ariane 5 rocket, which is, of course, the workhorse heavy lifter for the European Space Agency, who would be the agency responsible for this part of the Perseverance mission. The Ariane 5 is a very overpowered rocket for this sort of thing, so it's not a particularly realistic setup. I'm just going to be using the main Ariane 5 stage to get this thing off the pad, and then that upper Poodle stage, that's it. That's just what gets us into orbit and then gets us to Juno. We really didn't need a rocket as big as the Ariane 5, but I wanted this to kind of, again, be at least somewhat representative of what the European Space Agency might do, even though the Ariane 5 could well have been retired by the time this mission ever happens. I think the Ariane 6 was unveiled not that long ago. That would probably have replaced the Ariane 5 by then. Or we might even be on the Ariane 7 or some other rocket entirely. Who knows? So for now, I'm like, well, we don't really know. Let's just build an Ariane 5 because we had the Ariane 5 parts added not that long ago. So we may as well make some use of them. I mean, this SRB just here has a skin that is just made to make it look like the Ariane 5, so I probably won't get much more mileage out of this skin if I'm not going to be doing Ariane 5 replicas. So let's just do an Ariane 5 replica, and there it is, taking off on the just taking off, I guess. And we can begin our gravity turn. So again, as I said, the Ariane 5 is a very overpowered rocket for a mission like this in Kerbal Space Program, so to kind of help make this thing a little bit more sensible as a choice, I drained some of the solid rocket fuel from those side boosters, just so that, you know, I don't end up having way too much Delta V left over at the end of this mission. And as we ascend through the cloud layer, those SRBs are depleted and we can detach them, and then we can just, I guess, coast the rest of the way to space. So I've got the throttle fairly low, again, because this is a very powerful rocket for what it's propelling into space, so I don't need to use the entirety of the thrust from that engine. If I just leave everything at maximum thrust, we'll just end up flying through the atmosphere at such a fast rate. We'll just be covered in flames, and I'm not sure if a real fairing could be subjected to heat like that, and it would be very wasteful. You know, we're spending most of our energy just fighting the air resistance rather than, you know, getting ourselves into orbit. But as far as getting ourselves into orbit goes, we're pretty much there, aren't we? Our apoapsis is above the atmospheric line, so in just a second, when I guess wake up and start looking at the screen again, we can deploy that lower stage and, of course, the outer fairing. We can deploy that little antenna as well, and we can perform our circularization burn and then start planning our transfer to Juno. So that little communications dish I've deployed on the side of the rocket is necessary, because once we leave Kerbin's sphere of influence, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be able to connect to the tracking station. And this is a probe-controlled mission, and if you don't have a pilot Kerbal with you, and you can't connect to the tracking station, you can't create maneuver nodes, and you can't do other things, like you can only do 0% throttle or 100% throttle. You can't do anything in between, and you can't really pick and choose where you point on the nav ball. You can only point towards either prograde, retrograde, radial in, radial out, or normal and anti-normal, you know, the little shapes that appear on the nav ball. You can only point in those directions. You can't do anything else. So it's not that helpful when you want to do, I don't know, anything requiring more bespoke aiming. So we need that little satellite dish on the side in order to remain in connection to the Kerbal Space Center on our way to Juno. And that little dish, whilst it's very small, it is big enough to reach from Juno to Kerbin, at least in the orientations the planets will be in for the duration of this mission. And again, once we get to Juno, we have that relay in close proximity, so we can use the relay that's orbiting Juno once we get to the red planet, and we are well on our way to that fable. Oh, did anyone else see that? I didn't even notice that when I was putting this footage together. I think I saw a little comet appear just there. Do you need to reset your save file to get comets? I haven't noticed comets just in the wild on my Lowne Aerospace save file. It might be because they're really rare, but maybe that is a reason. You know, I was saying earlier that I needed an excuse to reset Lowne Aerospace. Maybe that's it. So we can do comet stuff. I don't know. I feel like I should do something with comets. I feel like they came out and I made that my little, you know, KSP 1.10 shared horizons update video where I covered all the basics, but then I haven't really done anything with comets. And I feel like we could do like a Rosetta recreation. Guys, there's so much scoop for things. So maybe that's a worthwhile reason to reset my save file, but I'm sure there's some more enlightened individuals in the comment section that will tell me that you're an idiot, that you don't need to reset your save file to get comments. But nonetheless, now I've said all this out loud, I've made the decision right now, like you can tell these videos aren't scripted, can't you, that I probably should do a video with Comet at some point in the future. But right now, we're looking ahead towards our imminent Duna periapsis, where you can see me planning out our maneuver node because we have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center, which means I can do that. So we're going to time warp around now and get ourselves our encounter with Juno. Now I've got a little bit more fuel in our lower stage, that I haven't got to separate the two vessels out into a lander and a circularization vessel like I had to last time we were here, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I learned that this idea actually wasn't that great in execution, because it meant we had to do a very inefficient circularization around Juno because it took so long for the lower landing stage to, land. But also, it was a bit more paramount to get into a low Juno orbit before we deorbited the landing stage, just because, unlike when I landed the rover where I just wanted it to land anywhere on Juno, so it didn't really matter where it ended up, this time I wanted to get this, I have to get it to land somewhere near the Perseverance rover, which you can see pictured here actually, because you may have noticed during the build time lapse of the little rover that's going to transfer the science off the Perseverance rover and take it towards the return rocket. It's very small. It can't go anywhere fast. It can't go very far unless you want to invest far more time than I was willing to invest. So we have to try and get this thing to land somewhere near the Perseverance landing site, which is much easier to do once you're in a low Juno orbit. So you can, plan things out a little bit more precisely. There is still a bit of trial and error involved. I'm kind of used to doing a lot of precise landings at this point because A, I've played the game a lot, and B, one of my more popular series on this channel is me rescuing Kerbals from other planets, which means I have to do a lot of landings near certain vessels, so I'm kind of used to it at this point. It does take a little bit of trial and error nonetheless, though. I did make a quick save just before I did my deorbit, and then if things didn't go wrong, which it did a couple of times, admittedly, I could just reload, tweak the deorbit burn slightly, and then redo it. I have edited out all of those attempts if it wasn't clear, so don't feel disheartened if you don't get it straight away, because neither did I. But this was my attempt where it got pretty close, so I was happy with this. I think I was aiming for no more than 1 kilometer from the Perseverance landing site, and I think admittedly we got to like 1.1 kilometers, but at that point I was like, it's fine. I don't even remember. I mean, this was yesterday evening, and now it's tomorrow evening. Well, for you guys, it's like a few days ago. But for me, it was tomorrow. It's today, which was tomorrow for when I recorded this video. It's also getting quite late, and I haven't eaten yet. If that wasn't obvious by the increasing incoherence of this commentary. Anyway, as you can see, we are approaching our Juno touchdown, so I have something I can talk about specifically. So this rocket is obviously falling faster than the rover because it's heavier. So we're going to use that little rocket, the little engine on the bottom of it, just to slow ourselves down upon final touchdown. It probably would have been fine, but I didn't want it to bounce too much upon touchdown because then it might have flipped over and we wouldn't be able to self-right it. And look at that. In a beautiful little twist, both vessels redocked. Of course I still love you upon touchdown, which I thought was kind of cute. Anyway, we've got that rover there. Do make sure if you download this craft from the description, you disable the reaction wheel in there. The reason this thing has a reaction wheel, because it doesn't need one. It's got wheels. It's got real wheels. It really has. Okay. The reason it's got that reaction wheel in there is because in case it flips over, you can just toggle the torque in that reaction wheel, and then it can just self-right itself fairly easily. It shouldn't flip itself over too easily in theory, because the center of mass on this thing is quite low, and it's got quite a wide stance relative to its length, so it should be fairly hard to flip over. But just in case you manage it, that's why I've got a reaction wheel on there. I've also got the little aerial there for no reason other than the fact I thought it looked kind of cute, so that's why it's got a little aerial. And yes, it can have a nice, I was about to say a reunion, but I guess these two little rovers have never met before, so they can meet for the first time. Hello, I think I called this rover Percy, as in Perseverance. I called it Percy in this video, so it's a little reunion. I said it again, didn't I? It's a little union of the two rovers, and here you can see them, two rovers mating in the wild. We can transfer the data from the experiment into the science containment unit, and we can get it back to the return rocket, I suppose. There wasn't really much more for me to add. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing this mission. It was really fun. I love doing little missions like this with lots of fiddly little bits and lots of different launches and lots of things to coordinate upon landing. That's why I love building surface bases and stuff, because there's lots of things to coordinate. It's not just a simple lander lands somewhere, Kerbal plants a flag, and then they all fly back. We got to do stuff on them. It's given me things to do on the surface of planets rather than just, plant a flag. So I really liked this mission. If you've got any kind of ideas for missions you'd like to see on this channel, then do let me know. I'm always keen to hear new ideas. I mean, I am going to do Life on Lathe and Destination Juno again at some point, so that will give me other things to do on the surface of planets, or in this case, Juno and Lathe. But, other things that I might not have thought of. I'm always keen to hear your guys' thoughts and suggestions. In case it wasn't obvious, by the way, I have sped the footage up to 4 times normal speed just there. I thought you guys might find it a bit boring to watch this thing in real time. I mean, good lord, this video is long enough as it is, so I've sped up a lot of the driving around on Juno segments just to keep things nice and punchy. And yeah, now we've docked with the little return rocket. We can transfer all of the science from the little rover's containment bay into the rocket's containment bay. Of course, this rocket is still quite small. It's not going to get this thing all the way to Kerbin. It's just going to get ourselves into low Juno orbit because, as it's probably been quite obvious up until this point, we're going to be docking to the orbiting vessel to transfer the science to the return capsule. That was a very messy sentence, I do apologise, but here you can see me in the map screen, taking a look at the lay of the land. Normally I would launch this sort of thing when the mothership is above me or nearabouts, so we can do a rendezvous really quickly, but however, I am bound to the location of where the relay is. I can't launch this thing when the relay is not near us, because then we can't connect to the Kerbal Space Center, and whilst it's possible to fly this thing with limited probe control, it's very difficult and it wouldn't really be that realistic, so I thought let's just wait for the relay to be above us so we can actually communicate with the Kerbal Space Center, and then we'll just, rendezvous with the mothership once we're in Juno orbit, where it's not essential that we have direct connection to the Kerbal Space Center at all times. So we're not really anywhere near our target, so our initial orbit is not going to be near it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to circularize and then see what I need to do in order to get myself on an encounter with the return vessel. Juno's quite small and it doesn't take much delta V to modify your orbit, so it's a fairly trivial thing to do, at least with enough practice, so it wasn't too much of an issue. But that's what I'm doing, and that's why I kind of launched at what might have seemed like a fairly counterintuitive time to launch. Now, before we get into a circular orbit, I'm going to detach that upper nose cone, which is mainly there for aesthetics, I'm not going to lie, but it's also serving it also serves the purpose of keeping this thing nice and aerodynamic during our ascent through Juno's atmosphere, but it's no longer needed, and we do need that lower docking port exposed now, so I'm going to detach that nose cone before we get into a circular orbit, such that it will crash back down to the surface of the planet and not leave low Juno orbit a cluttered nightmare. So yeah, I wanted to flatten my maneuver node as soon as possible because I wasn't sure if I would be able to remain in connection with the relay for the duration of that burn. So I needed to make sure I plotted it now whilst I still do have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center, because I might not have got that connection when it came to doing the burn. But it was okay. It was a relatively small distance, so I needn't have worried. I don't know why I worried. But I mean, as you can see, that relay connection on the map screen is very faint, but it is actually going through Juno, so technically not that realistic, but it's fine, guys, it's fine, it worked. And as you can see, we've got a fairly close intersect node just there. Our separation is very, very low, so now it's all a case of just time warping around and getting ourselves an encounter. And luckily, as fate would have it, we are still in connection with the relay. So I still have, full control of the probe. I've got full access to the whole throttle gauge. I paid for the whole throttle gauge. Gosh darn it, I'm going to use the whole throttle gauge. But yes, anyway, now we are nice and close to our target. We can slow ourselves down relative to it by making sure our nav ball's velocity is set to our relative target velocity. I'm then going to switch to this vessel here, and we're going to set our control point to this docking port here, just to make it easier to see where our alignment should be going, because then we're going to set our target to this return vessel here and just point towards it on the nav ball. And because we're using that Juno docking port as our control point, the target node on the nav ball put it in the correct orientation. With the two vessels pointing in the right places, we can just get ourselves a nice gradual approach. The alignment doesn't always hold true, so I like to just kill off all my speed just before docking, and then we can switch back and make sure it's properly pointing in the right direction, and then we can just coast towards it nice and slowly. And Robert Schiffer's brother. The Juno docking ports are super easy to dock because they have the magnets that attract them together. They're really, really strong, and of course the vessel in question is very, very light, so it will just zip towards the docking port without too much effort, which is one of the reasons why I was easily able to dock without monopropellant. And now we've transferred the science to the return vessel. We can get it clear of that service bay, and we can think about getting it back to Kerbin. But first thing we have to do is say goodbye to this vessel here. It's no longer needed. It has served its purpose. It's now just space junk around Juno. And you know how I feel about space junk, guys. I am very, very conscious of the space dolphins. We don't want that left in space, so I did a quick deorbit burn to make sure it would crash into the surface of the planet and not be left in orbit. And now that's out of the way, we can plot our course back to Kerbin. Now, we're not at a Juno to Kerbin transfer window, so we can't get a Kerbin encounter right off the bat. So what we're going to do is, first of all, create a maneuver node to get ourselves out of Juno's sphere of influence and into an orbit around the sun. And then going to create a second maneuver node on our orbital line around the sun. And, you know, as you can see, by modifying our solar orbit, we can get a Kerbin encounter. We can sort of force one. Now, it was very important that I create this second maneuver node whilst still in orbit around Juno, just because once we're in interplanetary space, we won't have that connection to the Kerbal Space Center because this little thing does not have a big antenna on it. We can only stay connected to the Kerbal Space Center whilst we're around Juno and we have a connection to that big relay dish. So we're going to do our first burn here. And then once we've done that first burn, we can take a look at how our orbit ended up. And before we leave Juno's sphere of influence and, of course, leave the range of that antenna dish, we can plot our second maneuver node. And that's it. We can plot our second maneuver node. And once we've plotted the second maneuver node, we don't really need fine probe control. We can just go there and just do it by pressing Z and X for full throttle and zero throttle. We don't need to be that precise because once we've entered Kerbin's sphere of influence, any sort of slight modifications that are needed at the end, we can just do that once we're getting close to Kerbin because we'll be able to connect directly to the tracking station. And that's my flight plan to get back home. So as you can see, we can just do a quick modification, mainly in the form of an inclination change to get ourselves on an encounter with Kerbin's atmosphere, which will of course be doing the slowing down. And you know, there are still antics that are yet to happen, guys. It wasn't the smoothest of re-entries, to put it one way. So you've still got things to look forward to. Don't go clicking yet. I love how I always try and encourage viewer retention, like way too late. Like I did this last time, didn't I? I said, oh guys, you got to stick around like 10 minutes into the video, when most of my viewer retention problems happen because people leave the video after 3 minutes. So I feel like bringing this up almost 40 minutes into the video, anyone watching now is probably sticking here to the bitter end, I hope. But if there are any doubts, there are still things to look forward to. So we've got to the maneuver node. As you can see, we have limited probe control. So I couldn't actually point ourselves to be along our maneuver node's like location on the nav ball. So I did all the burning we needed to do along the prograde marker first, and then I flipped my inclination to anti-normal and did the rest of the burns that we needed to do. So as you can see, it all went pretty well. We now have an orbital line that intersects Kerbin's sphere of influence, so it should now be fairly easily to do all of the modifications without being able to make maneuver nodes to get ourselves on an encounter with Kerbin's atmosphere. Now you can see here, I did quickly disable the comm network feature just so I could delete that maneuver node. I hate having maneuver nodes that I can't delete, and I feel like I should be allowed to delete maneuver nodes when I'm not got a connection to the Kerbal Space Center. It's just I shouldn't be allowed to create them or modify them. But I feel like deleting them should be a thing you can do. So I think it's a perfectly acceptable thing to do, to just quickly disable that option just so I can delete maneuver nodes and then re-enable it once it's done, just for the sake of keeping the video looking nice and clean, and also to satisfy my my compulsive need to never have maneuver nodes incomplete on the nav ball. So as you can see, I sort of janked my Kerbin encounter a little bit by pointing along radially and radial out, all that stuff on the nav ball, and then sort of hitting Z and X in very quick succession to do small burns to get my orbital line to get close to Kerbin than it was, just that when we get very close to Kerbin like this, it's only going to take a small amount of delta V to do the fine-tuning to get our periapsis to the height I wanted to get it at. When we're doing that burn from so far away on the other side of the solar system, the smallest amounts of delta V go a long way. So I thought, let's just get it fairly close and we'll do all the fine-tuning once we're in Kerbin's sphere of influence and we have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center's tracking station. And that's what I did. And now we are re-entering, and disaster strikes, ladies and gentlemen. I thought that heat shield would provide adequate, thermal protection to the upper stage, but it did not. We've lost our probe core. We are now just a dead thing, just flying away. Luckily, I did deploy that parachute, and that parachute will just deploy of its own accord. It doesn't need to be attached to a probe core so that, you can just deorbit debris and stuff. And I was like, oh, We've got no probe core. Hopefully it lands okay. I was hoping I would land somewhere relatively flat, but you know, I guess the game had other plans in store for me. We're landing in the mountains, a region fairly well known for being the opposite of flat. So I'm like, okay, hopefully we land somewhere where we're not going to go rolling for miles and miles and explode after a certain amount of time. But I think we're landing on the slope of a mountain. So tensions were high, not just at my computer chair, but I imagine also very high in the Kerbal mission control. I mean, this was a very long mission. They sent a rover to Mars, they sent a helicopter to Mars, they sent a rocket to go pick up the samples, and then at the very last hurdle they stumbled. Ooh, drama, excitement. Oh, we've teetered over the wrong way. And obviously, I've got no SAS, I've got no probe control. All I could do was just sit here and helplessly watch the events unfold in front of me. I tried recovering the vessel, like I tried to get the little recover vessel thing to come down, but you have to be at a complete standstill for that to come. And I wasn't at a complete standstill, so I'm playing the footage back a little bit faster just to save you the boredom, and I was just watching it with bated breath. But luckily it was fine. We stopped rolling, and we're saying it's fine. It was all fine, guys. You didn't need to worry. And now with that out of the way, we can recover our vessel and see what science gains we have to reap. And there we are, nearly 900 science units. So fairly respectable. Not sure how many science points the ESA hopes to get from Mars. Hopefully it's enough to unlock the Rapier engine so that we can get some cool SSTOs in real life in the real future. But all that's to come, I guess. It hasn't happened yet for me. On screen, there are links to other things if you'd like to check them out, videos and stuff. And there's links in the description as well. You guys know how end screens work, so I'm going to leave it there. Goodbye.